Hello and welcome to Always Take Notes. In this episode, Eleanor spoke with Jamie Glazebrook, who is the executive producer of Peaky Blinders.
Jamie spoke about all the exciting things we can expect from the upcoming series of Peaky Blinders. He talked about whether we're living in the golden age of television and also the issues that we face with just too much choice in streaming.
This is all about our attempt to broaden the podcast to take in TV and theatre, and we really hope you enjoy it.
Jamie, welcome to Always Take Notes. So we are here in your lovely little Soho office on...
Little?
Well...
It's enormous.
Well, I suppose the building itself is sort of small and
it's
tall.
little. It's little.
You can't fit much in Soho, to be fair, but it's beautiful. And we are in the exciting few months lead up to the 5th series of Peaky Blinders.
We are.
Of which you are executive producer.
Mm-hmm.
And you have been since it officially launched in 2013.
Yes.
So, can you tell me a little bit about the day that it was greenlit? Do you remember it?
I do remember. I certainly remember Steve coming in and saying to us, I've got an idea, and pitching, and he had clearly been thinking about this for a long time. And when he was talking, this whole thing came alive in our heads. I remember that, and I remember equally going into the BBC, and it just seemed to happen very quickly because people could tell this was all almost fully formed. And then the script took a while to write.
So what year was this?
It would have been, we went into the BBC in 2010, January 2010. Remember, it was icy outside. It was a very snowy Christmas. My son had just been born.
Oh.
Babies are lucky, my boss said. So we went in, and that was a quick meeting. You know, yes, sounds great. Steve pitched 2 ideas, and we pitched Anne Menser, who was at the BBC at that point, and she said, which do you want to do first? Peaky Blinders.
What was the other idea?
Well, the other idea is still in the air, so I can't say, but it's pretty cool. And, you know, yeah, it's great, yeah. And then the scripts took a while to come, but when it came, we just thought it was wonderful, and submitted straight to BBC. We didn't do any meddling, and neither did BBC. They went straight to the head of drama, and within a very short time we were sitting down and thinking, let's make this. And there was one note from Ben Stevenson, who was the head of drama, which is, can you bring on the antagonist a bit sooner? And then...
Just one note, is that quite rare?
Yeah, very, very rare. So it was very, very quick. And actually we did some more... And then we developed it more actually when we were making it. We started asking questions when it all became a reality. But I have to disappoint and say the champagne moment of green light just doesn't really happen.
No. It's
certainly with a show of this scale, because even back then, and this problem is worse now, your show costs so much to make per episode that you need to get, you know, the one broadcaster great. They'll be financing most of it or some of it, but you need to get someone else in as well to actually fully finance it. And then furthermore, how are you going to sell to the rest of the world? So doing these big scale, I don't want to get immediately into a whole woe is us, but doing those big scale shows they're going to have a different quality, because when you see a show like Gentleman Jack, that had to sell to HBO as well. So that's great. It feels to me very British, and it suited the BBC, what they wanted to have on, and HBO. But more and more those shows where, you know, if you think of 7-8 years ago, you might have had Lark Rise, you know, a show even of that scale would need to have significant other broadcaster on board, I think, because they're so expensive. It's very expensive making that sort of TV now.
And what actors did you already have? And did Stephen have actors in mind?
We didn't. We went in with a script, and this was a wonderful thing. Again, that doesn't always happen now, but we went in with just the script, and the lead role no one was attached. Quite quickly after that, when there was sort of green light was happening, and we had a finance plan set up. The script got to Cillian through his agent. And, you know, this message came that there was an interest, and we were obviously really keen to meet. And Steve and Karen Manderbach, who's my boss, who, you know, and also an exec producer, went and met him and immediately thought,
so was
wow.
Cillian for Steve kind of first choice? He was someone he'd thought
of? Yeah, absolutely. He was the first. Well, the message came through and it was like, what are we thinking? He's perfect.
Yeah.
And also I think that, look, we're so lucky with Cillian because he's someone who's both a star and a genius actor, and then a total gentleman. And, you know, because we've been working with him for a long time. So, you know, to be all three is, I would imagine, extremely rare. Certainly, how often do you see a star who can hold the screen like that, who is also an extraordinary actor who can go to all these different places? He's so Tommy Shelby, you almost don't see it because it's happened so beautifully. But, you know, Steve quickly realized he could put Tommy Shelby through a lot. And this guy who was very, almost couldn't read him in those first episodes, could you? The face was very, very held. And then he started to smile a bit in the end of that first series. Someone watched it recently and said, I've forgotten how much he smiles in that first series. And then as these, you know, he becomes very determined in the second series, and then tragedy hits in the third. And you see him goes to these places that we would have never imagined. So interesting.
And how did you come on board? How did you know? When did you first meet Steve?
I was working with Karen. Right. And so, and we had a background in comedy, as does Steve, and we were developing. We didn't have an office at that point. We worked from the coffee shop in the top of the Royal Festival Hall. And there was another show that we thought, with Steve, there was something that we had in the air with an attachment to HBO. Would Steve want to write that? We had a great meeting. That didn't work out, but Steve then called up and said, look, I've got another show I'd like to talk to you about. So it really was, Steve came and we sat on one of those tables in the Royal Festival Hall.
Was he whispering it in case someone stole his idea?
Like, you know what? At that point, we were all talked so loudly, anyone could have heard our entire slate. So we were. It was just perfect timing, and you know, and Steve at that point was as good as he is now, but he wasn't the known superstar that he is now. So we were. Look, there was luck involved, and also hopefully he could see that we had something. I feel that he came because, you know, with lots of TV offices, you walk through and you see all the lines of BAFTAs and the posters and stuff. And I've never asked him, but I wonder whether there was something quite charming about two very determined people who didn't have an office yet.
Yes, why do you think he came to you then?
I think we had a great conversation about this other project, and it was just one that was full of ideas, and it's very interesting. I think you could see that we would be very, very, you know, look, this has been our big thing. When the script came through, Karen and I just thought, wow, this is so incredible. We cannot mess this up. We have to really honour it in every way possible. And that's what a lot of our work has been in this last sort of 9 years, how to honour those incredible scripts and just get bring them to screen in the best possible way. Is
there something in particular that you remember that sticks in your mind from having read the script for the first time? A scene or a character or the way it was written?
I think the appearance of Tommy Shelby is exactly like you see it on the screen, as far as I can remember. Someone read the script and say, am I wrong? But I think, you know, the way he rides in and that incredible image of the girl blowing the powder into the horse, and it felt a very magical and mysterious way to start it. And that whole thing, you think you're in China and then it says Birmingham, England, you know, that just felt so clearly something different. And the fact that you're on horseback and then you ride through the town as you see in the show, and it felt a bit like a Western. So you felt, okay, wow, I'm not watching any period drama, I'm watching a Western.
And executive producer, a lot of people don't really know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain for those that don't?
Well, it can mean many different things. I see it myself as and this is different from TV to movies, but I see it for TV. If you think for Peaky, I've been the first one, Karen and I were the first ones in. Steve sits down and tells us the idea, and we're here all the way through, you know, sitting at the audio review and writing the blurb of the DVD, choosing the stills. So I take it very seriously as a sort of guarantor of quality across the whole series. So we are not the sort of hands-on producer, of which there's been a different one every series, is the one who, wow, they are working hard and they're doing these incredible hours, making these horrible decisions and just really just doing their utmost to get that show made on budgets every series, and they're on the ground. And we're sort of back, hopefully supporting them and helping, choosing the right directors, casting the directors, talking about the actual casting of every series, including who's going to do the music, having all of those conversations. But behind it all is we take so seriously, is Series 5 going to be as brilliant as Series 1, 2, 3, 4? Because we don't want that drop off in quality. Is every episode really interesting, and does it feel like the same show?
And you've involved in financing as well?
I'm across all those conversations, yeah.
And what is your favourite part of it?
Well, I'd say the moment when the script comes through is amazing.
How long does Steve take to write?
He writes, I suppose the first couple of episodes take a while, and I think that he thinks about them for a long time. And this is not something we talk to each other about, because we encourage the process to be, we do everything we can to make it feel as personal as possible. So it feels that he's been thinking about them, and sometimes we sit and chat about what might come. But I feel often we're like the kind of Dr. Watson to his Sherlock Holmes. So there was one episode where we're like, it'd be interesting. Tommy's starting to brew some, get involved in whiskey and liquor, and, maybe the prohibition's on, maybe the American thing would be appropriate. And he closed his eyes and said, okay, we're going to go to Russia. So, just sometimes it's a back and forth and not really making suggestions, but placing a context where he'll, I remember very much placing the context where he just took a deep breath and closed his eyes and said, I know what, there's some guns. Tommy's got his hand on some guns. That was quite late in the process. And that actually is the sort of driving story that enables everything to happen in the first series. He's got hold of some guns.
You're very modest, as I know from our pre-chat before this, but are there any suggestions that you can credit yourself with?
No, I wouldn't like to with the, there's some, I think it's really important. It's a collaborative, it's so collaborative. And I'm not on the floor directing, and I'm not there producing, and I'm not designing the costumes. I'm sort of so, just this sort of hovering around quite a long way back from the front line. But so it's almost sort of choosing the people, helping choose the people who make the choices is part of it. And we've been, I think also obviously we think we're good because we really take the show so seriously, but we've also been lucky with some incredible directors. And I think it's been fun realizing the kind of the different sense that every series has. Again, this isn't particularly a conversation we had with Steve, but the series 1 is like a Western, and series 3 is like sort of Hitchcockian psychodrama where there's people talking in rooms in country houses about revolutions abroad, and hey, wouldn't it be fun to get a director not from the UK? We got this wonderful guy Tim Mealance, Belgian. And then, series 4 is Down and Dirty. David Caffrey, who directs most of Love Hate, perfect for that. Just on the street, run and gun. Series 5, Anthony, I don't want to say too much about it. Perfect casting. What he's done with this material is just, off the scale.
And there have been many new stars added to the recent series, such as Anya Taylor-Joy, for instance, who's kind of hot property right now. She's been in a lot. Have you found that there are actors now coming to you guys asking to be in it, or how easy are you finding casting big stars now?
Well, we've avoided casting big stars for the sake of it, because I think it sort of then pulls you out. So there have been people who've expressed an interest who we think are great. I don't want to say who, but there's people who've expressed an interest, and sometimes in a very direct way and sometimes in an indirect way. And we've thought, And sometimes people say, I love that show in the press. And you think, are they saying that they'd like to be invited? But actually, we really are so careful to stay true to the script so it all feels it's the show and it doesn't feel, hey, we've got successful, let's suddenly bring in a famous person. And I really think, hopefully, that people are all feel that they're appropriate within the fabric of the show. So, Anya Taylor-Joy, you'll see her. What's great about her is, without saying anything, she arrives and just the words forced to be reckoned with,
What because it's been what, 2 years since the 4th series, and it ended on quite a cliffhanger. What is going to surprise people the most?
Wow, good question. I think I think the switch in this series is both a lot of fun, and visually, and the way it's directed is just extraordinary. But I think it's also, again, the heart of it and how you're getting into inside Tommy Shelby's head and what's happening in that head. A lot of it's been set up. A lot of what you're going to see, actually, you'll feel, that has been set up in the series 4. But I think that experience it's a pretty intense series.
And will Alfie be returning?
Alfie was shot on the beach.
I know,
Sorry to spoil.
But people still think that he will return, because almost every dead character on TV somehow manages to crawl back.
They do. But it's a bit like, lots of people... I felt so bad when, Grace was killed, and we didn't do a big funeral, and people thought maybe she's alive, and she was most definitely not,
I remember watching The Bodyguard and just being sure Keely Hawes
would
died, because
yeah.
obviously they all do, but no, yeah. Okay, so when Peaky Blinders first aired, it was quite slow to build popularity.
Mm-hmm.
How was that, dealing with not quite knowing if it would really take off?
Well, we were really... We loved the responses. The response was amazing, but... we obviously hoped it would be a bigger audience.
So what was the audience?
It started... it started really good. It started over 3 million. I think the first episode got quite a high rating, and then lots of people tuned out on that first episode. We kind of expected it because it was all rock and roll and different, and it was something like that hadn't been on BBC Two. So that wasn't a surprise.
For one series, or...?
Yeah, for one series. And then I remember... I was thinking, okay, we're coming back for series 2. I think the last episode got about 1.6 mil.
And what's the kind of target for being commissioned for another series?
I honestly, well, this is what's so cool about BBC. It's not really about that. It's about the BBC take really, really seriously if they know that they can't. It's very rare you can make a show that everybody likes. But if you make a show that some people really love, they're so happy about that. Just as if there's lots of people really hate something, they're sad about it.
BBC Two is a bit more adventurous with it.
Yeah, and so BBC just takes very, very seriously, is the audience really enjoying this? And they have various indicia, and I don't know how they get them, where it was that lots of audience felt this is really quite unusual and extraordinary. So, they stuck by us, which was brilliant. But I remember the second series, we thought, we're going to start this series, no holds barred. If you remember, the series 2 starts with, there's an explosion and there's a wonderful fight in a bar, the Eden Club, and just loads of stuff goes on, and it ends with an amazing cliffhanger. And that got exactly the same rating as the previous episode, the end of series 1, and I remember feeling very sad about that because I thought we're going to come out running. So it's been a slow build. But it's been wonderful. I think that the fans, the audience in Birmingham have stuck with us, and they were in early.
Have you noticed a bigger audience in Birmingham than, say, elsewhere? Obviously,
I don't know how it's spread, but I think our Birmingham audience are really loyal. And, Steve's from Birmingham, and he takes Birmingham so seriously. He loves the place, and it's really important that, screenings are there. He absolutely adores Birmingham, and... it's him to Birmingham, really. Do
you remember the night that it aired? Were you all together kind of scouring Twitter for responses?
No, I'm not that bad.
So how did you get an inkling that fans loved it then?
I think that we noticed that there was the sales were quite good. People were talking about it when it was off air.
Do you read the reviews?
I do read the reviews, but you have to take them not seriously because... You know how you see things that you really liked that get bad reviews and vice versa. So you have to apply that to yourself, which mostly means when you get a great review, just try and don't take it to heart too much. And if you get a ditto and you get a bad one.
Are there any bad kind of searing criticisms burnt into your mind forever?
No, there aren't. I think that people thought it was... I think that there was a lot of people who thought it was ridiculous. But it's
stylized.
heightened.
Yeah.
But it's heightened, so you sort of thought, yeah, it's heightened. And so if you sort of have to adjust to it.
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful, lots of people have adjusted, but it's not like lots of other things. So, yeah, it is heightened. You're in a world where, look, Steve proposed a world. He said, I want to be like your 10-year-old boy in this world. Or a 10-year-old, it's you look out and everything you see, you sort of make magical. And everyone's good looking, and the cars are really shiny, and the horse is just incredible. And if you see, that's the way we've portrayed it. It's everything's, the cast is so unbelievably good looking, and you come out and it's not gritty. Birmingham is all sort of like castles in the air, isn't it? It's all the sort of slightly heightened computer graphic, but not too much. But it's there. You can see there's an element of fantasy about it, and that was always the intention.
Were there any kind of very small, seemingly inconsequential details that either yourself or Steve insisted upon that you think is actually really kind of added to the show, or that maybe that people won't realise?
No, I mean, I think what seemed to be a small thing, but our first director, Otto, just responded to it so wonderfully, was when Steve said, like, in their mind, that we really wanted to avoid what we would refer to as, the period drama stink, that kind of feeling of, we're in a historical drama. And Steve said, yeah, because in their heads, they're not in one. In their heads, everything's happening fast and so on. And the way Otto took that and then thought, okay, we're going to go with Nick Cave and Jack White, which is great. It was exactly, and we didn't know sitting down that we were going to listen to that in the edit. That was a very great experience, because it was such a surprise, but it just felt totally right.
And it's been upgraded, if you don't mind me using the word, to BBC One for the 5th series. How important is that?
To us, it's great because more audience would see it. To BBC have been amazing because it's the same show. It's not. There's absolutely no change to go to one. It's as all the values within the show are the same.
Why now though?
I don't know. I think it's a sort of internal. BBC have a number of places where they can put drama. And if you're on BBC One, hopefully more people will tune in. If it creates more space on 2 for new things.
Yeah.
BBC 2 is a wonderful place to launch a drama because you're sort of not exposed.
So it means you kind of hit the mainstream now in terms of appeal.
Yeah, and it's become slowly more mainstream, hasn't it? It sort of doesn't look like a cult hit anymore. Our feeling is we didn't make it to be a cult hit. We wanted it to be just really mainstream. We didn't want it to be... The intention is never to be quirky. The intention has been to make as many people as possible go, wow, aged between, late teens to, octogenarians. Wow, there's something in here for me.
Do you know the kind of statistics for the demographic of your kind of core audience?
It's... No, not really, because I know that online lots of young people watch it. By young people, I mean, whatever the 18 to 34 or below. People probably who shouldn't be watching it. But I know on BBC Two, it was an older audience. So how that all fits together, I don't know. But the aim is everybody. It sounds so greedy, but that is the aim, I don't think you should go, a wonderful writer, Joe Ahern, said, you don't go out looking to make a cult hit, you go out to looking for broad, and then it might be that a certain section of the audience find you.
What do you find is kind of the main question all fans ask you, or tend to ask you more than...
When is Series 5 going to be released?
You still weren't able to tell me earlier. No. Autumn, you said. Yeah. And anything about characters or plot in particular? No,
do you know what? The fans know that you just want to watch the show, you don't want to have it spoiled, actually. And the press are brilliant at that. When if we show a press screening of something, no one says what happens. And there's certainly been an incident of, I don't know, a page of something was left on a location. Someone found it, just folded it up without reading it. I think it included the news of Grace's death, by the way. Someone just folded it up without reading it and gave it to a newspaper. Well, because the news never got out. So they might have read it, but what we heard was, I love this show, I don't want to be spoiled.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
And you've had, I remember Steve saying that he's had some unusual celebrity fans. A$AP Rocky came up to him at a Christmas meal in a restaurant and almost missed his flight because
Snoop Dogg.
Yeah. Any others that we don't know of?
I think a lot when he goes to LA. I think a lot, and I've seen a lot online, and it's and sometimes it's like I saw some amazing thing of sort of fancy dress party in LA. Who was it? Anyway, a lot, but they're not surprising really because we're trying to make such a mainstream show.
I guess it's slightly surprising when Americans are so into it because it does feel like a British show.
Well, this is what we'll get onto. This is part of the job. And part of what British TV needs to do now, and we're hoping to do with other shows, is to do something that's got a British identity. But in the end, you're talking about men and women. And it sounds so obvious. But actually, what they're doing isn't particularly British. It's not exclusively because there's men. What is it really about? It's about men, the effect of violence on men and how it destroys men and everyone.
And
Tommy's been affected.
Yeah,
exactly. And Tommy's been the recipient of violence in war. And you're seeing that ripple effect through so many people, men and women. And it's not very nice. And I think everyone can look at that and think, you see that. Even if you're not, if you've actually experienced it, I could imagine it's extremely resonant. But even if you've not, you see a truth in it.
And talking about kind of the industry in that way, I've noted. Have you seen Sex Education on Netflix?
Yeah.
And it was kind of odd because it's sort of a British show, but it was made to look as if it was kind of filmed in America, like the school was like a high school in America. And
but that was sort of, I think that was a choice because they were
trying to capture
in their head. It was the high school thing, but I think equally you could do a show that looks very English, but it also speaks to people all over. Well, Downton was people loved watching in America. It looked very British.
But I wonder if it was a bit more because they thought that if they didn't appeal to the American audience in that way of making them kind of see an environment they understood and knew, that they just wouldn't watch it. And I wonder how conscious it was of Netflix to kind of straddle both audiences in that way, and whether you feel pressure to really grab the American audience.
I think the key is always to find that moment of, it's easier with present day because you can find stories that just go everywhere and feel, a teenager living now in the UK will be experiencing lots of pressures that a teen in the States will be. But I think that with period it's harder because sometimes it looks as though it's very exclusively, I think we're very lucky the way we get these quite historical moments of what happened with Churchill and details of these gang wars and so on. But I think generally if you go for a well-written characters that have universals, people will watch you all over. If you think of a show like Vikings, that's watched all over the world. Game of Thrones, I know it's fantasy, but it's all a British cast pretty much. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
It's all to do with really that quality of are you invited inside the head of that lead character? And that's, I won't go on about it, but that's really the trick of what Steve does and of what we do when we make it, is that it's an ensemble, a wonderful ensemble, but the lead character is Tommy Shelby. And partly when you're watching it, you're not watching him, we're trying to give you the experience of being him. So that music you're hearing, that's not us illustrating, that's what's in his head. And there's a small difference, but it's a huge difference. Because, sometimes a score can be a little bit like the minstrel with Brave, Brave Sir Robin. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I hear a lot of those scores. We're not doing that because actually what was inside Brave, Brave Sir Robin's head was, I'm freaking out, I don't want to go to war. And we'll be playing what's in his head. So sometimes Tommy Shelby's hearing rock and roll, but sometimes he's hearing You and Whose Army, because he's just thinking, when is this going to end? When do I? It's my wedding day, and I still have to, kill and burn people. Do you know what I mean? So and so he's not a happy man. So that's a massive distinction. And I think that when you're experiencing someone, so you're not watching it, you're in it. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to be Tommy Shelby for a moment, and it feels also. Why do we like watching you? There's a freedom to being Tommy Shelby. So there's a sense of, and there's a moral challenge to it as well because we know what he is. And and when you think about it, I think I was really surprised at the end of series 4. Karen and I thought, wow, he's really at a low here because, You've seen him. He's you remember he makes his youngest brother blind someone. He's the one good person in the play, Jesse Eden. He's basically, bedding and then extracting information and cheating on. He just felt morally at a low, and we thought we wanted the end of the series to kind of be sort of exciting and rousing, but really indicate that. So that Laura Marling covered It's a Hard Rain Gonna Fall. It was like, yeah, because it's bad what's going on. But I was surprised that there weren't lots of people writing, God, I hate that guy now. And people are feeling rightly uneasy, and it's just so interesting knowing where the story goes from there. People are feeling uneasy about him, but you're still sticking with it because you're in his head.
How much of the story do you know? So when Steve's writing, how much had he mapped out, kind of series 1 to... Steve's
spoken in quite a lot of detail about what he imagines the final scene, which, gives you chills when you hear about it. And it's, again, got a beauty and a sort of inevitability to it. And then I think sometimes he maps out generally, but then he surprises himself. He writes he's not a writer in this anyway, where he puts up cards on a wall. You should see him writing about it. It's talking about it. It's very interesting. He said, if you do that, then it'll happen. Whereas if you just write, then unexpected stuff happens.
What was the most unexpected twist for you watching Steve change his mind in series 1 to 4? Was there anything that kind of just went completely off track?
I mean, I think that there were some pretty crazy avenues in series 3. I really do. I thought that was amazing.
But in terms of you thinking, you not realize him not quite knowing where something was going to go and then changing it in the writer's room.
Well, the writer's room is Steve's head.
Well, yes, Steve's head, yeah.
And he doesn't. So they come through. The scripts come through. It's like, wow, here we go. But
so he hasn't sent the script to you and then suddenly had an epiphany and changed something.
No, not so much. He's pretty clear how it all goes in, and I think that sometimes there's he does a wonderful. Actually, most of the time he does a wonderful thing where things come together in that final episode, and it's like a Turkish carpet. It's all sort of threaded together, and suddenly, if you think of the ends of. I think every series, but especially series 2 and 3, those stories all come together and sort of play out almost at the same time in such a clever way.
Is this the final series?
I'm not sure if I don't know if I'm actually what's public about that.
I don't think much is public about it.
No, so I don't. I'm not sure I can comment.
Okay, moving on.
But what I can say is that Steve is a storyteller. Steve is a storyteller, and storytellers don't want to stop telling stories,
Well, this is another question in terms of the industry at the moment, is that sometimes does it feel like seasons go on too long? Mm-hmm. That there are too many seasons in a series, and when we need restraint and just to cap it, end on a high. Do you find that the industry at the moment is commissioning too many seasons? I
don't think they are. I think, funny enough, there's a move from Netflix to shorten series. There's, someone observed this. This isn't an edict, but someone observed that they are tending to favour new series over series coming back.
They're cancelling a lot at the moment.
I think that we've definitely benefited from having 6 hours in a series, which isn't very much. Because if you think of, the old, what was on the networks, whatever, there'd be a series of 20 episodes. That's a lot. And even now, if you look at some series that are 10 or 12 episodes, 1 or 2 of those can be marking time. With 6, you're kind of like, 2 long films next to each other. It's not very much time at all. So Steve moves on. And I think the other thing he's done, which, again, he never said this is the format, but he does it, and it's wonderful, is when he moves forward 2 years every time, there's a new moment in history. He finds wonderful things that are resonant in the history. That time between the wars is so resonant, everything about it.
He's interested in fascism, right, for the 5th series?
It's pretty interesting, yeah. A charismatic politician with a...
History's been kind to him.
Yeah. So there's things to write about that he's passionate about. And I think you'll really see that in this next series. You'll see what he's very, very passionate. So I think that we would all know, he would be the first to say, but at the moment it's and I think that the other thing is that when you've got a writer like Steve, the way to do it, if you've got certainly a single lead, is you have to just go deeper into that lead's head, and that's what Steve is prepared to do, and it's really full on, because you're becoming very, very, you can be introspective and you can see them do unpleasant things and so on and go to unpleasant places, but if you're prepared to take that journey, which he is, then you won't get bored. I think if it's something that's lighter, more of a confection, either it'll go forever because it's a fun convection, or you'll tire of it.
Well, that's what I'm noticing a lot on Netflix, is there are more and more kind of silly series, like binge-worthy series that they're commissioning tons of them.
Yeah.
And then maybe they're quite short, maybe the episodes, and they finish after 2 series. Where's your head at in terms of?
But Netflix also do, but they also, series 1 of House of Cards is one of the best things ever, and Orange is the New Black is.
I felt that went on far too long.
Oh, such a good show, though.
It was.
Even if those outstayed welcome, but they're such good series.
But do you think anyone is really still watching? I'd be interested to see the stats.
I don't. We'll
never
know.
We'll never know. Yeah. Well, I think I had enough after series 4.
Yeah.
Because you don't really move out of the prison.
No, but those characters are just wonderful.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's for another day. But I do, lots of experts and people within the industry are saying there was the golden age of television, and now are we reaching peak TV? And I mean, personally, as a journalist who has to write about television every week, I find myself kind of writing almost like chore lists of all the television I need to watch, and it's slightly overwhelming. And when I speak to my friends, they're like, "Oh God, I've got to catch up on this, and this," and it's too much. And we're none of us are watching the same thing anymore. We're all watching different things. We can't talk about it.
Well, I agree. And again, I think this is the great thing about. I would just recommend to everyone, just let's do short series, everyone. Because find out, when we started, Karen as an American was like, we want to do long series because that's how you get inside people's heads. What you want to do is get inside people's heads. Well, actually 6 is great, and that's not too much. That's not, you can binge a series in a weekend if you want to. It's these long series that will kill us.
Yeah.
And I think that and I think the other thing for all of us is really concentrating on quality if possible. And you probably see a lot of stuff that you would rather unsee.
Sort of wasted space. Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's just, if it's quality, if you really feel, look, it's like all sorts of writing. Have you got something to say? Because writing's hard. Well, this is a writing.
Well, yes. Well,
podcast.
I mean, that's the ideal. But that doesn't mean there's a lot of bad writing just being pumped out all the time for, for traffic. And I suppose now that we've got so much data and everyone is so hooked to the algorithm and slave to the algorithm, people, I guess that's why they're commissioning so much, because they know so much about their viewers. They can kind of cater to every taste now. Well,
I think the other thing, actually, and again, this is something I feel pretty old-fashioned about, is this idea of level of engagement, because I'm so used to TV's on and you're watching it or you're not watching it, but actually there's a kind of, we do everything we can, believe me, to make sure when you're watching Peking, you're really watching it, and all the lights are off and all that sort of thing.
Instagram.
Yeah. But there are other sorts of TV that you'll have on, and you'll all be talking over, or you'll be eating, or you'll be on the computer at the same time. And I don't know too much about that level of engagement personally, but I think that might explain some of the different kinds of show that we're seeing, because there's the kind of semi-engagement show out there, isn't there?
Yeah.
I've certainly seen, the kind of heavily genre stuff where you sort of know what's going to happen. It's appeared at a few places. But you don't need to listen to every line. That exists too.
So you're not worried about where television is going right now?
You have to be an optimist and think that people will. I'm more worried about other genres, to be honest, like books.
Yeah.
Because it's bad when you get on a train and everyone's looking at TV, not looking at books.
Downloaded things to watch on the tube.
Because TV doesn't exist without all literary forms. It's not a thing on its own. It's a medium that kind of, I'm not saying just about book adaptations either.
Do you worry if you'd been pitching Peaky Blinders to the BBC now, you would have found it as easy?
Oh, definitely would have been harder. I think if it it definitely would have been harder. I think we'd have got there, but it would have been just because and also I think that there's a real thing now of that first episode has to really grip you. And obviously you need to do something to grip people, but you can't just reach for the same bag of tricks every time. So the tricks that work brilliantly in that, in terms of working with writers, if you study The Sopranos, House of Cards, Breaking Bad, those 3 pilots especially, I mean, they're extraordinary, and they all have a lot of things in common with each other. But our pilot was, I thought, so beautiful, but it's everything unfolded intentionally in a certain way, and you'd be worried about that now because everything is fast, got to get people literally addicted in that first hour. So I think it's hard.
You talk about studying The Sopranos. How much of your earlier career, I suppose, was spent studying pilots and learning from the
all
best?
of it. Well, it's always we're always studying still.
What have you studied recently?
Well, that's a good question. In terms of recent, I'll have to think about. I'll genuinely have to think about that.
When you study it, do you write notes?
Well, when the ones that I cited by study, I mean, really think about how come this works. I mean, you study everything in a sense, but with these ones, they work so well, and they work not to a formula, but you can observe. When I did A-level music, and you have to write Bach chorales. I remember saying, well, these aren't rules. No parallel fifths, no parallel octaves. They're not rules. They're observations of what Bach tended not to do, or didn't do. And this is the same thing. You're not looking at. No one's written a rule book, but they do really interesting things that obviously work in terms of setting up a character and a world. But by the end of that first episode, you're interested in the character. You know what the world is. You know what it's about. You've got a good sense of a number of relationships. That's hard to do in an hour, and they do it in a very, very particular way. Each of them. Be really interesting. You'll see similarities. Well, I don't want to go into the whole thing, but the Peaky pilot does it in a way that I don't know whether Steve just was doing it through his head. I imagine so. It's just a sort of storytelling, because you don't want it to be too. You don't really ideally want to say here's the the beats you've got to hit, because then it become formulaic. That's why they're more observations, and then it's exciting to look at something which seizes your attention that doesn't do that.
Peaky aside,
I mean, studying The Americans, by the way, which is miles. I know I'm not the last person on earth to watch it, but that's been interesting because we're so in our development interested in a single lead, where everything is. I'm seeing it through Tommy's head, and if you look at most of those stories, all of those stories, either he's in the room or you're kind of talking about him or you're thinking about him, and every story is eventually going to land on his lap. And The Americans is interesting because they're genuinely 2 leads and they're returning, but it works brilliantly.
The Sopranos is generally credited as having kind of changed television forever. Is that something you agree with, or is there another show that for you has just kind of changed the way you thought about your career?
It's not. I think that there were some. I loved some dramas, but I found some dramas quite boring, and I found watching. Well, actually, not Buffy, but that Joss Whedon show Firefly. It was just so inventive and so intelligent and so fun. That was a real eye opener. That something could be so much fun and good. And then actually, The Shield was something that I got as more addicted to than The Sopranos. And again, there was a speed to it that was so extraordinary that, it was always surprising.
So, Jamie, let's now go back to your career beginnings for the last segment of the episode. When was producing an idea that you had as a young man?
Well, I don't think I knew what a producer did for quite a while, and actually until I had a job in TV. But I knew I was very much into music. So I was very lucky. I studied English at university, but I was also in the college choir, which was all quite sort of...
So you were at Oxford?
Yes, and so as a chorus, you'd sing every day. And then I went to on after that to sing for 2 years at Christchurch, and I got involved a bit in drama and was in a band and all that sort of thing. It was really good fun.
What kind of band?
It was Latino funk. Yeah, it was pretty good. Some amazing musos in it, actually. I was just on percussion, by the way.
You would have done well now. Latino's totally in vogue.
But what was great about singing in a choir is that it was that sort of like art in a church in your day. It's a very heightened artistic experience where you're hearing incredible music. Thomas Tallis, William Byrd. And you see how that moves people. And you also, sometimes you have to sing in funerals and sometimes you sing in weddings. And you see how very tangibly music and arts can touch people and be meaningful. And I think that was a massive thing, because I think that'll go through all artistic experiences. And to have that understanding has been a real privilege. And then, almost as if to go the opposite way, I managed to get an early job on a chat show called Light Lunch with Mel and Sue. And I literally was there. I'd been asked to photocopy for 2 weeks work experience.
This was after university?
Yeah, after university. And I was just very, very keen, and ended up staying at that company for 4 or 5 years. It was called Princess Productions, and the bosses were Henrietta Conrad and Sebastian Scott, and they'd both worked on The Big Breakfast, and they were really sort of geniuses at that sort of live TV, which there isn't much of at now. That kind of experience of you're watching live and a sense of anything can happen, and they had managed to kind of grow a team of such creative sort of day producers and writers. It was extraordinary to be part of it, and a total eye-opener, because also when you see sort of silly, kind of essentially silly stuff, you underestimate how much work goes into it. And they would be drumming into you how important the details are, how important actually all the facts are right, and so it was I couldn't have been luckier to be at that time and to have had that experience. And then also reminding yourself how entertainment's really good.
Yeah.
And entertainment's really serious, and you want to be entertained. And then I worked on a kind of much maligned, a few years later, I worked on a much maligned show called The 11 O'Clock Show, which was, I did one of the later series, which frankly isn't, terribly distinguished, but wow, I worked with some amazing people on it. It's this producer called Phil Clark and wonderful writers and
what was your title at this point?
I was a producer. And so a producer in entertainment, you're there, you're in charge of really the script and how it's going to run on the night. You speak, if you're a day producer, you're more, on a show that comes on every night, you're thinking, okay, this is what Tuesday night's show. If you're the series producer, you'll have had all the bigger conversations about, what are the graphics, what's the set going to look like, who's going to be our host, and so on. So you sort of gradually move up. Entertainment had a lovely structure where you would start as a runner and you would slowly go up quite a structured ladder, actually.
What's the ladder like?
For me, it was a runner and then a kind of junior researcher. So to start with, I was making tea and running errands and then being in the phone room. And then the next thing I had to do was brief the guests when they came in to Light Lunch. So briefing is sort of, you say to them, well, these are the questions they're going to ask, and you just want to check that they're happy with that and they've got interesting answers. Because if you don't want to have a kind of dead air, so it's a sort of negotiation really. And then to a junior researcher, where you're finding out about the guests and maybe helping work out what happens in the show, up to AP, associate producer, assistant producer, where you're doing the same kind of thing but similar, and then a day producer and then a series producer. So that evolution, I was very lucky. It took me 4 or 5 years.
So how old were you when you became series producer?
Well, something good happened. Digital TV. ITV2 happened, and this princess had a show on ITV2 before anyone had heard of ITV2, and it was a daily entertainment show, and it was tightly budgeted. We're in a whole new world. And the producers on Light Lunch, who were all quite grand and amazing, would be too expensive. So a lot of us people who are AP level were told, okay, now you're day producing. So that was an amazing baptism of fire where, on a show that no one has heard of now, actually a lot of people worked on that. You know, the original series producer went off to Hollywood, and he's written on incredible blockbusters. One of the writers writes for Ant and Dec, another produces Sunday Brunch. It was an amazing group of really inspirational people to be with.
And where were you based at this point?
That was in London.
And you were how old? 20?
Sort of 30.
You were 30. And how easy was it to live in London as a kind of producer, learning the ropes?
It's tight, and I was lucky to have family in London, but it's tight. I think it's probably tighter now, and I think it's probably the worst for people coming into the world. The key thing is, let's say you want to be a runner. Where are you going to be a runner? Because that almost sets you on a bit of a course. If you're a runner in a post-production house, that means you're going to slowly go to worlds of editing. Or if you're a runner on a film set, it means you're going to be, out and about, and who knows where that'll lead. If you're a production runner on an entertainment show, then there's a structure, and that I knew I wanted to do the writing that a producer does in an entertainment show, and so on. So it suited me very well, and it was a totally new experience. I was frankly happy to be working in anything on telly, because it feels like a world that's very difficult to get into, and it's extremely
something you were aware of when you started working there, and how much has that shifted?
I would say, broadly speaking, and I don't know, because I've had a very strange and fortuitous series of movements from entertainment to comedy entertainment to comedy to drama. I like all those genres equally, and they're all equally tricky to do and equally magnificent. But I would say, by and large, drama's sort of a bit posher, and entertainment is more mixed and open, which gives it a real energy as well, by the way.
Yes, there is still that snobbery against kind of low comedy and easy comedy, would you say?
Well, obviously not from me, because I've done late night Channel 5 shows that were real eye-openers. And not from Karen, who also has done, entertainment shows. Karen produced a number of comedies, Third Rock from the Sun and Roseanne and so on back in the day, and before that, entertainment shows. So actually, not and I think the pleasure for me of something like Peaky is I think that there's real sort of high art and poetry in the script and wonderful social satire. But there's also, sex, violence and rock and roll. So it's a sort of high and low put together, but hopefully avoiding the middle.
And how did you go from series producer to then working on The IT Crowd?
That was, I worked on a sketch show. So I was lucky enough to know someone who'd worked on the series one of a sketch show called Manstroke Woman, which had Nick Frost and Amanda Abington and so on. The first series had gone out, that series producer had left, and I was really fortunate to be asked to go to produce the second series. I knew one of the crew, and I'd done various other comedy shows, and they felt they could do it. I could do it. I knew the production manager. She felt
how important was kind of having a network and contacts?
I think by that point, if you've worked on shows that have lots of people, the network makes itself.
Right.
I don't know if I'm a great believer in networking, because actually it really comes down to, I've worked with them. Yeah, they would be, I'd like to work with them again. And that's sort of just being, and you need to not be just doing that, but that's sort of, I can understand that network rather than trying to go and make connections without actually proving yourself to them. But and I think that's someone once described it as being a bit like being in a game of poker. As long as you're sitting at the table, you're in the game. Just do not stand up and walk away from the table.
Do you remember your first kind of massive cock up and how you learnt from that?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
What was it? God, you look quite terrified thinking about it.
It was doing a. I'm not going to name the names. It was doing with some wonderful presenters, and the BBC had done a script for the promo, and they said, Jamie, you go and you can produce the promo. And the presenters, I was a bit too junior for that job, and the presenters were like, come on, let's just ad lib it. And what you should do as a producer is say, well, ad-lib all you want, but I need to have a good copy of the script first. I need to have a version of those lines as per script. And I didn't do that. And that horrible feeling that you've just spent a day and lots of money's been spent and you didn't get what you were supposed to get sort of is, I feel a bit sick thinking about it, to be honest.
You look nauseous.
Yeah, it was awful. And then I was like properly told off as well.
Oh, God.
It's fair. You know, but it's a fair, I was deserved to be properly told off. But it's, I suppose, look, I mean, a lot of, as with anything, it's like a performing arts thing. Everyone's got quite strong characters. Everyone's got strong wills. And so, you know, it's managing that and managing your own self and negotiating between everyone so that you know, get where you need to be.
On the IT Crowd, obviously the humour was at some points riskier than perhaps anyone could get away with now. I'm thinking of the trans woman episode about April, the transgender woman, which was kind of, I'm too young to remember the reaction at the time.
Actually, I didn't produce that series. I produced series 2, but I'm sure that had equally risky things. But yeah, it was.
So how much are you kept awake at night, kind of thinking about whether you might court controversy with anything that you've produced or worked on?
I think you could be kept awake at night about. I think I've had pretty much good fortune not to be involved in something like that. There's things involving members of the public that I really now see that's just so morally grey.
Well, especially now in the post-Jeremy Kyle era.
Yeah, and I think that everyone understands that now, and I think that'll all change. And I think so. There are definitely things that will look very, very different. And to be honest, there's so many things that keep me awake at night already about what's going on now. That I haven't got space to be kept up, but I'm sure I would be kept awake at night by lots of stuff in the past, frankly.
Because, you know, I think Peaky Blinders hasn't had this issue, but Poldark, for instance, was hugely criticised for the rape scene in which the woman was like sort of turned on by it, was too into it.
Well, now that is a really interesting one because we have often had that discussion of violence, and we've really gone very consciously into not making any sexual violence salacious. Although, listen, there's a lot of violence in the show because it's about violence, and Steve's always been careful right from the beginning to show consequences of violence in every way. The whole show is about the consequence of violence, and I think one of the really interesting things is that up to not long ago, Tommy Shelby was like, I managed to get away. I managed to close a door on it. And he says that to Arthur, just do what I did. And then there he is at the end of series 4, breaking apart. And so I think because the theme is the consequences of violence, having said that, there's always going to be moments where you go, was this too explicit?
What moments are you thinking of?
Well, I think that I'm really happy with where it ended up, but we all had big conversations of when Polly tries to get her son out of jail, and Campbell says, "Well, yeah, on one condition." That felt, because they acted it so well, it felt like it was just a stunning scene, but it felt that actually that scene in an early cut was really quite long and utterly brilliant. But it felt appropriate to cut it down in the context. You know, context is so much as well, isn't it?
Of course.
In the context of, I'm tuning in a show and it's got, you know, rock and roll playing and everything. So I think those are the uncomfortable moments. That's an example of an uncomfortable moment that we just discussed very openly. And I think one of the great things about the show is it's not just me exec producing. There's me and Karen and Steve, and in this series David Mason, and different series other exec producers. So it's been ones that we've talked about as a group, which has been great because then it's been a very open conversation. And BBC have been fantastic as well.
Now, what's next for you? Have you ever thought about writing?
No, I think the next thing, which I would love to tell you about but I can't, would be, it's really to get a show like, have another program like Peaky Blinders, not in terms of how it's, success, because who knows if you'll ever have that again, but just in terms of something where you think that's a really interesting, I feel people use words about TV like ambitious and daring and whatever. Do you know what the best word is? Interesting. Because what I really want to watch a movie where you come out and you go, wow, I've got a lot to think about. That's given me a shit ton to think about, and I'm really interested to think about. That's going around my head, and also I'm entertained by it. So always aiming for entertaining shows, however serious they are, and aiming for something that's really interesting. So that's sort of most our slate, and we've got a few things that are getting closer and closer. But Can you
tell us what's been announced?
We're developing this incredible book, When We Were Orphans, by Katsuo Ishiguro, and that's with a wonderful director and writer called Anthony Chen, and he's got a collaborator writing called Christine Ong, and that'll be really special. He's done a movie called Ilo Ilo, which won the Camera d'Or, I think, at Cannes a few years ago, and he really is something. And sitting in a room with him and Katsuo Ishiguro and talking about what this project could be. And Ishiguro is the most modest and intelligent and full of integrity person you could possibly imagine, and funny. You saw, wow, there's a lot of potential there. So that's exciting. And, the wonderful Danny Brocklehurst has written a script called Dirty, which is in development with Sharon Horgan attached. And that's kind of rip-roaring and provocative, and I think we'll talk a lot about the kind of ethical challenges that face us all, big and small, and it's wonderful.
And we're kind of reaching our time limit now, but I know it's just a difficult question, but if you could look back over your career, be that working on Peaky or the IT Crowd, your fondest, most memorable moment, what is it? On set.
On set? Well, I don't want. I mean, there was a fond moment, I can tell you, watching some of the episodes come together on Peaky, because the edit process is fascinating, and watching some of those come together and then seeing the music work and seeing everything drop into place is always extraordinary. And that's the result of so many people working so hard. So I would never claim credit for it, but to be there when it all comes together is just extraordinary, and then to see it play out with an audience is extraordinary. Then you know what? I had so much fun on one of the early jobs on Light Lunch, because that was live, and to go live was every day for 60, 80 episodes was just the best thing. And the mood on that, everyone was young, everyone seemed to be below 30. Mel and Sue were just the best fun in the world. It was a ride. It was great.
Do you kind of miss the potential for things to go comically wrong live?
I wish that I would love live TV is great, and there should be lots of it, and that's something that you won't get so much on the SVODs. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and it's a bit like a sitcom. I got to tell you, working on the IT Crowd with an audience, that was extraordinary as well. It really was, and to hear that writing then be enlivened by an audience, and I hope that we never get to the point where a show with a studio audience is looked upon as really, really old-fashioned. We're sort of nearly there now, but it's a great medium. It really is, because it encourages the writer. It's like a challenge to the writers. Can you do this? And then when the writers like Graham can rise to that, and when you feel that energy from an audience, it's not about telling the people at home where to laugh, but it is sharing an experience. It's very, very cool.
And people often say the best way to kind of sharpen your skills as a writer or as a producer is to start with comedy. Do you agree with that?
Comedy's great. I definitely agree with that. I think that entertainment is a word that isn't taken seriously enough. It's so great to be entertaining. And I see actually lots of people now are making very, very entertaining dramas. If you look at what's on, so there's people are really going for it, which is fantastic. And there's none of the sense of the problem with theatre, wonderful as it is that you've got your captive audience. Whereas in the world of entertainment, people will switch off entertainment telly. And I see, I think that's a really vital aspect.
You really got to earn it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on that note, Jamie, thank you very much for speaking with Always Take Notes. And
thank you so much for having me.
Hello, it's us again. Now, I'm going to own to the fact that I haven't at this stage listened to the Jamie Glazebrook interview.
We never listen to each other's separate interviews.
I, on several occasions, have listened to yours. You've never listened to
I actually haven't. No, I did listen
Shameful.
to Christina Lamb.
But you've told me it's really good. And, I'm sure that's true.
It is.
So how was
was.
Jamie?
He was great. We bonded over our love of copious. I think he went through something like 6 mugs of tea over this 1-hour interview. He was a true Englishman. And yes, he was very charming, very self-deprecating, and as with many of these very successful people that we interview, felt like he hadn't quite made it yet.
Okay.
But obviously he has.
Did you contribute to that feeling, Elliot?
I didn't. I told him to get a grip. Yeah, I thought it was. I'm very interested at the moment in peak TV, because I feel, as a culture writer and someone who has to watch a lot of TV for my job, that it's just overwhelming and there's too much and too many series, and TV shows go on for far too long.
But not everyone gets sent home for 4 days to watch all of Game of Thrones back to back.
That's true, but when do you ever feel like you're watching the same television show as your friend? You're always watching different things on different streaming sites. When television used to be a shared experience.
Interesting.
And it hasn't been a shared experience since Bodyguard, and there wasn't a shared experience before that. I don't know. I remember Bodyguard was really surprising because everyone was watching it. And it was so great to go into the office and have something to talk about that wasn't work over a cup of tea. The only shared experience is Love Island, really, every year.
I don't watch Love Island.
Have you ever watched Love Island?
I think I've seen like a bit by accident, like in a pub or something. Anyway,
what have you been?
What have I been doing?
Well, I was going to ask you a personal question.
I think we should save that for the next episode.
Why?
Because we have to record an extra for that as well.
Okay, we don't have that much to say. All right.
Stretching our material. Anyway, this has been Always Take Notes, hosted by me, Simon Acombe.
And me, Eleanor Halls.
Our producer is Nicola Keane. Our social media is by Zara Hankier. And our graphic design is by James Edgar. Our score is by Jess Danheiser.
And if you'd like to find us on Instagram, we're at Take Notes Always. No, we're not.
No, we're
Always
not.
Take Notes. And on Twitter, we're on Take Notes Always. And please do leave a review, rate and subscribe on iTunes.
And think about contributing to our crowdfunding page on Patreon, which is patreon.com/always take notes. Many thanks.
Bye.